the hospital never slept. Even in the early hours, when the city outside had surrendered to the weight of exhaustion, the corridors of Saint Meridian Medical Center pulsed with an energy of their own, relentless, sterile, and alive. The hum of fluorescent lights, the echo of distant footsteps, the muted rhythm of machines monitoring lives on the edge. For Clara Bennett, that rhythm was as familiar as her own heartbeat. It had to be. She had been a nurse at Saint Meridian for almost 6 years. In that time, she had seen every version of humanity, the noble, the desperate, and the ones who didn't make it. She had learned to move with quiet precision, to hide the tremor in her hands when life slipped away, and to smile just enough to keep families from collapsing. But beneath the calm surface, she was tired, not just from the endless shifts but from the silence that came after them. That night, the air was chaos. Rain hammered against the glass doors. Ambulances screamed in one after another, their red lights bleeding into the sterile white of the lobby. The hospital radio crackled with incoming trauma codes. Multiple casualties from the highway crash. ETA to minutes. Clara glanced at the clock. 2:47 a.m. She hadn't eaten since yesterday's morning shift. Of course, she whispered to herself, tying her hair back tighter. Her partner on duty, Nurse Riley Cho, met her at the intake bay, eyes wide. "They're saying 6 cars. Pile up." "At least for criticals," Clara nodded, voice calm. "Get 2 trauma bays ready. Call ICU for beds. And Page neurosurgery will need them." The moment she said it, she didn't know that call would change everything. By the time the first ambulance door swung open, there was a storm of movement. A young man, mid-20s, unconscious, blood pooling at his temple. Another, screaming, holding his broken leg. A woman whose pulse was there and then wasn't. Clara worked by instinct. Orders flew around her like wind, but her focus never faltered. She moved from one bed to the next, voice clear, hands steady. BP dropping, 80/40. Hang another bag. Pupils unequal. Had trauma. Where the hell is neurosurgery? The door burst open, and that's when she saw him. Dr. Adrian Hale didn't look like the man whose name echoed through every hallway. The legends said he was arrogant, brilliant, impossible to work with, the kind of surgeon who could save your life but wouldn't remember your face. But the man who stepped into the air that night looked more like someone pulled from the wreckage himself. He was tall, with tired eyes and a surgical mask hanging around his neck. His scrubs marked with old stains, maybe from another life he hadn't had time to wash off. "Who's leading trauma?" he asked, voice clipped. "I am," Clara said, without looking up from the patient. He turned to her, slightly surprised. "You're a nurse." She met his gaze, calm, unflinching. "And you're late." For a split second, he almost smiled. Almost. Then he saw the patient on her table, the one with the head wound, and everything changed. "Get him to Neuro 3, Adrian ordered, snapping into motion. "Prep for decompression. GCS is 6. He's herniating." Clara followed, pushing the gurney alongside him as they raced down the corridor. The wheels screeched against the floor, the sound echoing through the sterile walls. "Vitals?" he asked. "BP holding at 90. O2 at 84. Chronic ready?" "Almost." He looked at her, sharp. Almost isn't good enough. Something in his tone, that mixture of control and desperation, sparked something old in her. A memory of another night, another emergency, another man she couldn't save. She swallowed hard. "It will be." Inside the operating theater, the room exploded into organized chaos. Monitors beeped in sync with adrenaline. The anesthesiologist called out numbers. Adrian scrubbed in with machine-like speed, his focus absolute. Clara assisted without being asked, reading his movements before he spoke. He didn't have to look. She was already handing him instruments, adjusting drips, suctioning, anticipating. At one point, he glanced up, briefly locking eyes with her. For the first time that night, his voice softened. "You've done this before." She nodded. "Too many times." He gave a faint, almost imperceptible nod. "Then stay close." Hours bled together. The patient stabilized barely, but the damage was severe. When Adrian finally stepped back, his gloves streaked with blood and exhaustion. The first light of dawn was breaking through the small window above the sink. Clara finished charting the vitals. She could feel the weight of the night pressing down on her, the ache behind her eyes. Adrian peeled off his gloves, tossing them into the bin. "Good work," he said quietly. She raised an eyebrow. "Is that a compliment?" He hesitated. "It's recognition from you. That's probably rarer than sleep." That earned the faintest smirk. "You're sharper than most, and you're colder than I expected." He paused, studying her, as if trying to decide whether she was brave or foolish. "Cold keeps people alive," he said finally. Clara met his gaze. "So does compassion." They stood there for a moment's silence, exhaustion, the hum of the fluorescent lights filling the space between them. Then the intercom buzzed. "Dr. Hale to her too." "Emergency." He turned away. "Welcome to Saint Meridian," he said over his shoulder. "We don't get to rest." She watched him leave, feeling something unfamiliar, not admiration, not attraction, but curiosity. The kind that could ruin everything if she let it grow. Later that morning, after her shift finally ended, Clara walked through the staff corridor, rubbing her temples. Her scrubs smelled of antiseptic and coffee. She could still hear the echo of Adrian's voice, the rhythm of the oar, the pulse that never stopped. At the breakroom door, she overheard two nurses whispering. "You heard about the new policy, right?" "Yeah. HR's cracking down again. No dating, no anything. They're watching everyone after the Torres incident. Even rumors could get you suspended." Clara frowned. Again, the older nurse nodded. "Zero tolerance now. One mistake, and you're gone." Clara forced a small smile. "Good thing none of us have time for mistakes." They laughed, but her mind was elsewhere, replaying the moment when Adrian's hand brushed hers, purely by accident, as they passed instruments. It was nothing. It had to be nothing. By the time she reached the parking lot, the sun had fully risen. Rainwater glistened on the asphalt. Her reflection shimmered in a puddle, tired, pale, still carrying the night on her face. She closed her eyes and breathed deeply, letting the air fill her lungs. Behind her, someone's footsteps echoed. "Long night," a familiar voice said. She turned. Adrian stood a few meters away, a coffee in each hand. "For you," he said simply, holding one out. She hesitated. "You don't seem like the type who brings nurses coffee." "I'm not," he replied. "But you're not like most nurses." She took the cup. "Careful, Dr. Hale." That almost sounded human. He smiled faintly. "Don't tell anyone." Their fingers brushed barely as she took the cup, and for a heartbeat, everything else, the sirens, the policies, the hospital, the rules, disappeared. She didn't know yet that this would be the first of many moments she shouldn't have allowed. That every word exchanged under the hum of hospital lights would become evidence of something forbidden. That someday she'd look back on this morning and realize it all began with a single touch, in the space between saving a life and breaking a rule. The week after the highway crash felt endless. Saint Meridian had barely recovered before the next wave hit: a factory explosion, multiple burn victims, 2 brain traumas. The hospital had become a living organism, pulsing with exhaustion and adrenaline. For Clara Bennett, sleep had become a rumor. Every morning she arrived before sunrise, and every night she left long after the city went quiet. And every day, somewhere between the chaos and the quiet, she saw him again. Dr. Adrian Hale, not by choice, not even by coincidence. The neurology wing and ICU were connected by a single corridor-long, sterile, lined with glass. And somehow, no matter how busy things got, their paths crossed. Sometimes it was in passing, a glance, a nod, a silence that spoke too much. Sometimes it was in the operating room, where words meant nothing and trust meant everything. It was dangerous how natural it had started to feel. One morning, Clara stood at the nurse's station reviewing patient charts. The hallway buzzed faintly with voices, footsteps, and the soft beeping of monitors. Adrian appeared at her side without warning. "Trauma patient from last week, Mitchell, 23, subdural bleed," he said, tapping her chart. "You were with him during intake?" She nodded. He's been stable since yesterday. CT's clean. He glanced at her, unreadable. Good work, she frowned. You're doing that again. What, the compliment thing? You sound allergic to it. His mouth curved slightly. Maybe I just don't like repeating myself. Clara met his gaze, calm, steady. Or maybe you're scared of being human. He looked away, pretending to study the chart. You shouldn't talk like that. Someone might hear. There it was, the invisible wall again. The reminder that whatever this was, it couldn't exist. The policy had been posted everywhere that week, printed on paper, taped to walls, stapled to bulletin boards. Professional Boundaries Enforcement Policy Section 4A. Non-fraternization between staff. Violations will result in immediate disciplinary action, up to and including termination. The wording was cold, absolute. The HR department had even added a confidential hotline for anonymous reporting. It was a hospital of secrets now. People whispered more softly, lingered less, looked over their shoulders before laughing too loudly. Clara tried not to care. She told herself it didn't matter, that Adrian Hale was just another surgeon, brilliant, arrogant, untouchable. But her heart didn't listen to her brain. It never had. That evening, during a late shift, Clara walked past the surgical observation deck. The lights below flickered as a team prepped for an emergency craniotomy. Adrian was at the center, commanding, calm, distant. Watching him work was hypnotic. Every movement was deliberate, precise, elegant even in its brutality. He spoke little, only when necessary. At one point, he looked up, eyes flicking toward the observation window just for a second. She froze. Did he see her? Their eyes met. For a fraction of a moment, the sterile glass between them felt like something else, not separation, but protection. Then she stepped back into the shadows, her pulse outpacing the monitors below. Still watching the genius work? Clara turned. Riley Cho leaned against the doorway, smirking, coffee in hand. Clara forced a chuckle. Just checking on post-op schedules. Sure, Riley teased. You know, rumor is HR's looking for any excuse to bust someone. Especially him, Clara frowned. Dr. Hale? Yeah. Word is, administration thinks he's too powerful, too famous. They'd love to catch him breaking a rule. Clara's stomach tightened. That's ridiculous, Riley shrugged. So was the last scandal. And look how that ended. The mention of it was like a slap. The memory of Dr. Torres, the surgeon who'd been fired after an affair with a nurse 2 years ago. He'd lost his license. She'd vanished. Saint Meridian never forgot its ghosts. By the end of the week, Clara was running on caffeine and adrenaline. Her shift overlapped with Adrian's again, this time in the neuro recovery ward. He was checking on a patient when she entered the room. Pressure looks good, she said, glancing at the monitor. Hold the sedative for another hour, he replied without looking up. She moved closer, adjusting, and for a line. Their hands brushed. The touch was brief, accidental, but the air changed instantly. Neither spoke. Then the patient groaned softly, drawing them both back to reality. Adrian stepped back. You should go, she blinked. Excuse me, I mean, get some rest. You've been here since last night. I could say the same to you. He allowed himself a thin smile. Touch, for a second, they both laughed quietly, carefully. It felt dangerous, like laughter in a burning building. At M, Clara sat in the empty cafeteria, nursing a cold cup of coffee. Her body screamed for rest, but her mind refused to slow down. She was replaying moments, his voice, his eyes, the way he said, stay close, and she hated herself for it. Love wasn't supposed to grow here, under fluorescent lights, between codes and blood and grief. It wasn't supposed to be possible. She stared at her reflection in the dark window, tired, pale, human. You can't afford this, she whispered to herself. Not again. 2 days later, an accident changed everything. A delivery truck had collided with a city bus. 17 injuries, 3 critical. The trauma unit exploded into chaos again. And this time, the worst of it, a teenage girl with massive brain trauma was rushed straight into Adrian's hands. Clara was assigned as his lead nurse. Her name's Emily, she said, jogging beside him as they wheeled the gurney down the corridor. 15. GCS 5. Parents on the way, Adrian's jaw tightened. We're losing time. They burst into the OR, the doors slamming behind them. The world shrank to white light and steel. Cranny drill, Adrian said. Clamp, suction. Clara's hands moved before he finished each word. They worked in a rhythm that felt both mechanical and intimate. Every time he glanced up, she was already there, anticipating, steady, unshaken. Pressures dropping, someone warned. Adrian's voice hardened. Not today. The minutes stretched into hours. Sweat beaded down Clara's neck. Her fingers cramped from tension. The monitors screamed. Then silence. A long, thin beep. Clara froze. Adrian's hand hovered midair. Restart compressions, he ordered. Clara started chest compressions, counting under her breath. 1, 2, 3. Come on, Adrian muttered. Don't you quit on me. And then a faint, irregular beep. The monitor blinked. She was back. A collective exhale swept through the room. Adrian stepped back, shoulders sagging. Clara looked up at him, exhausted, trembling, alive. Their eyes met. Something passed between them, then something unspoken, raw, and dangerous. It wasn't gratitude. It wasn't relief. It was recognition. The kind that changes everything. After the surgery, Adrian disappeared into his office. Clara finished the post-op notes, her handwriting shaking slightly. She told herself it was adrenaline. It wasn't. She went to the supply room to grab new scrubs, trying to steady her breathing. But when she opened the door, he was there, leaning against the counter, head bowed, eyes dark with exhaustion. I didn't know anyone was in here, she said softly. He looked up. You were incredible in there, she hesitated. Don't say that, why not? Because we both know what happens when people start saying things like that. He took a step closer. The room felt smaller. Clara, he said quietly, you think I don't know the rules? I think you don't care about them. He smiled bitterly. You're right, I don't. The silence stretched. The air between them thickened. She wanted to leave. She didn't move. Finally, she whispered, we can't. I know, he said. That's the problem. Outside, the intercom blared another emergency. The world went on. Inside that tiny room, two people stood still, breathing the same air, breaking the same rule, pretending the moment wasn't real. But it was. And in hospitals, moments like that never stay secret for long. The air that night felt heavier than usual. It had rained all day, not the kind of storm that came and went, but a steady downpour that soaked the city until it gleamed like glass. Inside Saint Meridian Medical Center, the windows fogged from the contrast between the cold air outside and the heat of the fluorescent lights within. The smell of antiseptic mixed with the faint scent of wet pavement that the staff carried in with them. For most people, it was just another Thursday. For Clara Bennett, it was the beginning of the longest shift of her life. It started like any other endless forms, charting vitals, moving between rooms where lives hung by wires and monitors. By the time her night shift began, the air was already running at capacity. A city bus had collided with a tanker on the outskirts of town. Multiple casualties. They called it a mass trauma event. In reality, it meant chaos. Clara tied her hair back, washed her hands again, and stepped into the current. Code Orange, the loudspeaker repeated, its voice almost mechanical. Doctors ran, stretchers flew past, and the smell of blood hit the air, metallic, sharp to human. She caught sight of Dr. Adrian Hale before she even realized she was looking for him. He was at the far end of the corridor, issuing orders to a group of residents. Calm, precise, controlled. Their eyes met for a moment. Just enough to say, we're in this together. Then the first wave arrived. There were screams. There were silences worse than screams. The air filled beyond capacity within minutes. Nurses were rerouted to the OR. Surgeons were pulled from sleep. The cafeteria became a triage bay. Clara worked on autopilot. A boy with a shattered leg. A woman with third-degree burns. A man who wouldn't stop whispering his wife's name. She'd been in the same bus. There was no time for sympathy, only motion. Until she heard it, a voice behind her. Bennett with me, Adrian. She turned, breathless. Where, or to? Head trauma. It's bad. They pushed through the chaos together, weaving between gurneys and paramedics shouting over each other. The patient was a young man, barely 18, with a head wound that wouldn't stop bleeding. Clara could see the bone fragments glinting beneath the crimson. She swallowed the wave of nausea and met Adrian's eyes. He didn't need to say a word. They moved as one. Inside the operating theater, time changed. Outside, people ran, yelled, lived, and died. Inside, there was only rhythm, heartbeat, breath, motion, silence. Clara passed instruments without hesitation. She knew his movements by now, like a song she could hum in her sleep. Pressure's unstable, someone said. Clamp, Adrian murmured. Done. Celine, already in. It wasn't flirtation. It wasn't even friendship. It was something more dangerous, familiarity. Hours passed. The boy's vitals stabilized, but the damage was severe. Adrian stood back finally, his gloved hands trembling slightly, not from fear, but from sheer fatigue. Clara handed him a towel, their fingers brushing again. Another one saved, she said softly. He shook his head. Not yet. You did everything you could. He looked at her then, not as a colleague, not as a superior, but as a man stripped of every wall. Sometimes that isn't enough, he said quietly. The words stayed with her long after the surgery ended. By dawn, the air had emptied of chaos and filled with aftermath. The survivors slept. The dead were gone. The hospital had that strange quiet that comes after catastrophe, too still, too fragile, like a held breath. Clara sat at the nurse's station, staring at her reflection in a dark computer screen. Her hands ached. Her back burned. Her heart was a drum. Riley passed by and dropped a cup of coffee beside her. Still alive? Barely. You and Dr. Hale were in or two all night. Yeah, Riley smirked. You two work well together. Clara shot her a warning look. Don't start. I'm not. I'm just saying it's intense. You can feel it. Feel what? Riley smiled knowingly. Whatever you're pretending isn't there. Clara sighed. He's my superior, and I'm the Queen of England. Riley, relax, her friend said, raising her hands. I won't say anything. Just be careful. People notice things. That last sentence landed like a knife. Later that morning, Clara was called to the recovery wing. The boy from the surgery, he was alive. Barely, but alive. She entered the room quietly. Adrian was already there, standing beside the bed, his expression unreadable. How is he? She asked. Stable. For now. She stood beside him, looking at the boy's pale face, the machines that kept him tethered to life. This job, she said, it doesn't let you breathe, does it? Adrian's voice was soft. Breathing's optional here. She turned to him. When's the last time you went home? He gave a half smile. Home is a myth. She laughed quietly. You should write that on the entrance sign. For a second, the room didn't feel so heavy. They left the ward together, walking down the long glass corridor that connected neuro to ICU. The morning light bled through the windows, pale, washed out. The city outside looked like it was holding its breath too. You ever think about quitting? She asked suddenly. He glanced at her. Every day. Then why don't you? He paused before answering. Because I wouldn't know who I was without it. Clara nodded. Yeah, I get that. Silence settled between them again, not uncomfortable, just fragile. Until he said her name. Clara. She stopped. He didn't look at her, just kept walking, hands in his pockets. You should take a few days off. Rest. I'm fine. You're not. You've been running on empty for weeks. Coming from you, that's ironic. That made him stop. He turned, expression unreadable. I don't want you burning out, he said quietly. Why? He hesitated, the slightest flicker of something in his eyes. Because good nurses are rare. It wasn't what he wanted to say. They both knew it. The days blurred after that. Accidents, patients, reports, life and death on repeat. But something had changed. The air between them, the rhythm. Every conversation felt like it existed under a microscope. Every accidental touch lingered too long. One evening, during another endless shift, Clara found herself alone in the supply room, the same one where their conversation had ended days ago. She was restocking syringes when the door opened. Adrian stepped in. She didn't turn. "You really need to stop meeting me in here. People will talk. Let them," he said. She froze. "What?" He moved closer, stopping just behind her. She could feel the warmth radiating from him, even through the thin fabric of her scrubs. "You think I haven't tried to ignore this?" he said, his voice low. "This isn't a good idea. It's not an idea at all." She turned then slowly, meeting his eyes. "You'll ruin everything," she whispered. "Maybe everything needs to be ruined," he replied. They stood there, suspended in the hum of the fluorescent lights. Neither moved. Neither dared to. The door creaked. Someone passed by outside. They stepped apart instantly, instinctively. Adrian's jaw tightened. "We can't afford mistakes," she nodded, her heart hammering. "Then stop making them," he exhaled, almost a laugh. "You make that sound easy." Then he left just like that, leaving her alone with the sound of her own pulse echoing in her ears. By the end of that week, both of them were ghosts in their own routines. They spoke less, avoided eye contact in hallways. But every time their paths crossed, something invisible shifted. They were pretending, and everyone else was pretending not to notice. Saturday night. The rain returned harder this time. Their lights flickered. Another ambulance arrived. Another trauma, another body. Clara was running between bays when she heard her name. "Bennett," it was Adrian, calling from the surgical floor. "Multiple head injuries coming in. I need you with me." She wanted to say no, to walk away, to protect them both. But instead, she said, "I'm on my way." They worked through the night again. 4 surgeries, 2 saves, 1 loss. When it was finally over, the hospital was quiet once more. Adrian sat alone in the scrub room, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. Clara entered quietly. "You should go home," she said softly. He didn't look up. "I can't." "Then at least rest." He finally raised his head. His eyes were tired, but his voice was steady. "I'm fine." She smiled faintly. "You always say that." And then, for the first time, she touched his shoulder lightly, without thinking. He didn't move. Neither of them spoke. The silence said everything. Outside, dawn was breaking again. Another day, another shift, another heartbeat between what they wanted and what they couldn't have. They didn't know it yet, but the hospital would soon find out what they were trying so hard to hide. And once Saint Meridian knew, there would be no turning back. By the time the next week began, Saint Meridian had forgotten the crash, but not the exhaustion it left behind. The hallways were quieter, but the silence was heavy like an aftershock. Machines hummed, pages turned, and people whispered instead of speaking. It was the kind of calm that never lasted. For Clara Bennett, quiet was dangerous. It meant time to think, time to remember every word, every look, every moment she shouldn't have shared with Dr. Adrian Hale. She told herself it was over, that whatever had begun between them had died under the harsh lights of the OR. But denial is a fragile thing in a place built on truth. It started small again, as it always did. A chart handed over, a nod in passing, a shared silence between shifts. Then one evening, Clara found a note slipped beneath her locker door. No name, no signature, just a few words written in neat clinical handwriting. Neuro 3. After rounds, her heart knew who it was before her mind allowed her to. The neuro wing was nearly empty when she arrived. Most of the staff had gone home. The hallway lights were dimmed, and only the low hum of the air conditioning filled the space. Adrian stood by the window at the far end, still in his surgical scrubs, the city lights reflecting off the glass. "You came," he said quietly. "You asked." He turned, his face caught between exhaustion and something else. "You shouldn't be here. Then why did you ask me to come?" He didn't answer. For a moment, all she heard was the steady beep of a monitor from a nearby room. Finally, he said, "Because I can't stop thinking about you." The words hit like a pulse. Clara took a step back. "Adrian, I know the rules," he interrupted. "I wrote half of them myself when Torres got fired. I know exactly what happens if anyone finds out." "Then stop," He looked at her, really looked for the first time since that night in the supply room. I tried, her voice softened. So did I. For a long moment, neither spoke. Outside, rain tapped gently against the windows. The reflection of the city lights painted both their faces in shades of silver and blue. You said once that cold keeps people alive, Clara whispered. He smiled faintly. And you said compassion does too. Seems we're both right, or both wrong. Their words hung between them like electricity before a storm. He took a step closer. Tell me to stop, she should have. But she didn't. And that was the moment the line disappeared. They didn't kiss, not yet, but something far more intimate happened, a surrender of silence. He reached for her hand, slow, deliberate, like a man touching a live wire. She didn't pull away. For a second, the hospital ceased to exist. No rules, no protocols, no eyes watching, just two people who had run out of reasons to pretend. Then footsteps echoed from the far end of the corridor. They separated instantly. A resident appeared, holding a clipboard. Dr. Hale, they need you in neuro too. Adrian cleared his throat, professional mask snapping back into place. On my way. When the resident disappeared, he looked at Clara again, the warmth gone, replaced by something harder. This can't happen again, he said. She nodded. It already did. The next morning, Clara walked through the cafeteria, trying to act normal. Riley was at their usual table, sipping black coffee and scanning the staff bulletin. Morning, Clara said, forcing a smile. Morning? You look like you didn't sleep. Rough shift, Riley tilted her head. You know HR's been sniffing around again? They're watching the night staff. Clara froze. Why? Apparently someone filed an anonymous report. Said there's inappropriate behavior happening after hours. Clara's stomach twisted. Any names? Not yet. Riley lowered her voice. But I'd be careful, especially with Hale. People notice things. Clara forced a small laugh. I think you're overreacting, maybe. But the walls have eyes, Clara. Always have. That night, Clara couldn't focus. Every sound made her flinch. Every voice in the hallway felt like it could be talking about her. She found herself checking over her shoulder, watching who lingered near the nurse's station, who asked too many questions. Adrian, meanwhile, had retreated behind his professional armor again. He avoided her gaze during rounds, spoke only when necessary. To anyone else, it looked normal. To her, it felt like suffocation. By midnight, she convinced herself it was over, that they'd both learned their lesson. And then the hospital pager beeped. Code blue, or two. Her heart dropped. The patient was a middle-aged woman, post-stroke complications, crashing fast. Clara burst into the or just as Adrian was scrubbing in. Vitals, he barked. BP 60/30, heart rate 40. He didn't look at her. Intubate. Now, they worked in silence, the kind that comes from focus and fear. Then the heart monitor screamed. Flatline. Starting compressions, Clara said, her voice steady even as panic rose around them. Adrenaline, 1 milligram, Adrian ordered. Minutes passed, or maybe seconds. Time folded in on itself. Finally, the monitor beeped again. A weak rhythm, but it was there. The room exhaled. Adrian stepped back, sweat beading at his temple. Clara handed him a towel, her hands trembling slightly. He met her eyes just for a moment, and that was all it took. After the surgery, the corridors were empty again. He found her in the stairwell, the one that led to the rooftop. She was sitting on the steps, head in her hands, the adrenaline still burning through her veins. You shouldn't be here, she said without looking up. Neither should you. She looked up then, her eyes wet with exhaustion. I can't do this. Yes, you can. This job, this place, these rules, I'm drowning in them. He knelt in front of her, close enough for her to feel the heat of his breath. Then let me be the one who pulls you out. Her lips parted, a wordless protest that never came. He leaned closer, slow, certain, inevitable. And this time, she didn't stop him. Their first kiss was not soft. It was desperate, the kind that comes from too many nights pretending not to feel. When it ended, neither spoke. Somewhere below, a monitor beeped, a reminder that life went on uncaring. Clara exhaled, her voice barely a whisper. "We crossed the line." Adrian's reply was almost a confession. There was never a line, only fear. The next day, nothing looked different. The hospital still hummed. The patients still needed saving, but something had shifted. They met eyes in passing, brief, careful, but alive, and every stolen glance felt like a secret carved into the walls. Riley noticed first. She always did. "Something's different about you," she said one morning, narrowing her eyes. Clara forced a smile. "Maybe I finally slept," Riley snorted. "Right, and I'm dating McDreamy," Clara laughed, but her hands trembled as she held her coffee. Late that night, Clara was charting vitals in the ICU when a voice behind her made her freeze. "You're here late," said Dr. Peterson, head of the neurology department and Adrian's superior. She straightened. "Just finishing notes, sir." He nodded slowly, his gaze lingering. "You've been assigned to a lot of Dr. Hale's cases lately." "Yes, sir. I'm part of the neuro rotation." He smiled faintly, but there was no warmth in it. "Be careful, Nurse Bennett. People are watching." Then he walked away. Her heart pounded. When she told Adrian the next morning, he went pale. "Peterson knows," she said. "Not yet," he replied, "but he suspects." "What do we do?" He looked out the window, his reflection fractured by the morning light. "Nothing," he said finally. "We pretend. For how long?" "As long as we have to." Clara shook her head. "That's not living." "No," he said softly. "It's surviving." That evening, as the sun set behind the glass walls of Saint Meridian, Clara stood outside watching him prep for another surgery. The light caught his face just right, the exhaustion, the focus, the man beneath the myth. And she realized with quiet certainty, it was already too late to turn back. Because sometimes love doesn't destroy you all at once. Sometimes it erodes you one heartbeat at a time. And under the white lights of the hospital, they were both already disappearing. The city was restless that night. Storm clouds hung low over Saint Meridian, swallowing the skyline in a haze of rain and electricity. The hospital glowed faintly in the distance, a lonely beacon pulsing through the darkness. Inside, the air felt heavier than usual. It wasn't just the storm. It was what hung between Clara Bennett and Dr. Adrian Hale, a silence thick enough to bend the light. They hadn't spoken much since the stairwell. Words were too dangerous now. But silence could be disguised. Clara's shift started at p.m. The corridors gleamed under fluorescent light, the smell of antiseptic sharp in her throat. She'd told herself that tonight would be normal, that she'd bury what happened beneath work and exhaustion. But the universe had other plans. An explosion at a nearby construction site. Dozens injured. 5 critical. The hospital pager screamed to life before her first cup of coffee had even cooled. Code orange. Multiple traumas inbound. And just like that, the machine woke again. By 9:30 p.m., chaos had consumed the air. Blood, shouting, movement, the choreography of crisis. Adrian was already in scrubs, calling orders, his voice steady even as the storm outside grew louder. "Chrony tray. Clamp set. We're opening Neuro 3. Pressure's dropping on bed 5. Get Bennett in here." Clara barely had time to pull on gloves before the gurney crashed through the door. A man in his 40s, unresponsive, head bleeding through bandages. "Crushed skull," Adrian said, eyes scanning monitors. "We have to relieve pressure." "Now," she nodded, moving without hesitation. "Vitals at 80/50, oxygen 90 and falling, prep for decompression." "I'll scrub in." The storm roared outside. Thunder rattled the windows. As she adjusted the 4-line, a flash of lightning illuminated the room, bleaching everything in white for a single, silent heartbeat. Then darkness. The power cut out. The machines screamed as they lost connection. Alarms flared, then fell silent. The hum of the lights vanished. Only the storm remained. "Backup," Adrian barked. "Where's the backup generator?" Clara's pulse hammered. She could barely see. The only light came from the red emergency exit sign and the faint glow of the monitors trying to reboot. On it, someone yelled from the hallway. It's supposed to kick in automatically. It didn't, Adrian snapped. Get me a manual override. He turned to Clara, his voice low but steady. We're not stopping. She swallowed hard. We can't operate like this. Yes, we can. We have to. The generator flickered once, twice, then steadied just enough to power one overhead light. A single, harsh beam fell over the patient's body, leaving the rest of the room in shadow. It looked like theater, brutal, intimate, and far too real. Adrian's voice dropped into focus. Scalpel, Clara handed it to him. Her hand brushed his, that familiar jolt, magnified by darkness and fear. They moved like a single organism, each breath synchronized, each motion deliberate. The rest of the world didn't exist. Outside, thunder rolled again, deep, unending. BP dropping, Clara said, her voice tight. Clamp, suction, Celine, Adrian ordered, his tone surgical steel. His hands never faltered. The beam of light caught the sweat on his forehead, the sharp lines of his concentration. Pressure stabilizing, she whispered. Good, he murmured. And then silence again. The kind that exists only between two people who trust each other more than they should. Minutes stretched into hours. When the lights finally flickered fully back on, the patient was alive. Barely, but alive. The team exhaled in unison, some clapping, others collapsing into chairs. Clara removed her gloves, breathing hard. Her hands trembled. Adrian turned toward her, his voice soft now. You okay? She nodded. Fine. You're lying. She looked up at him, eyes shining with exhaustion. So are you, he almost smiled. Fair. They both laughed, quiet and broken, the laughter of people who had just dragged someone back from the edge and realized they were still standing there themselves. When the others left, she stayed behind to clean. He stayed too. You don't have to do that, he said. I know, but she didn't stop. The room still smelled like metal and storm. She wanted to wash it away. He leaned against the counter, watching her. You handled yourself perfectly tonight. She shook her head. No one's perfect in the dark. That's where you're wrong. She turned, meeting his gaze. Don't make this harder. He stepped closer, slow, cautious. You think I want to? I think you already did. The power flickered again, plunging them back into half-darkness. For a moment, it felt like the storm had found its way inside. Clara froze. Her breath quickened. He took another step, close enough for her to smell the faint trace of antiseptic and rain on his skin. We shouldn't be here, she whispered. He nodded. Then tell me to leave. She didn't. And in the silence that followed, every rule they'd ever obeyed began to fall apart. He reached for her, slow, like he was afraid she'd vanish. His hand found her jaw, warm, trembling. For a heartbeat, the world stopped. The monitors, the rain, the flicker of the emergency light, all of it blurred into nothing. Then he kissed her. It wasn't the desperate collision of the stairwell. It was slow, careful. The kind of kiss that asked for forgiveness before it even began. When it ended, neither moved. Her forehead rested against his chest. His hand lingered at the back of her neck. Outside, thunder rolled again, softer now, distant. The lights returned fully, buzzing back to life. Reality snapped into place. Clara stepped back, her breath uneven. We can't, I know. Someone will find out. Then let them, he said, his voice steady but his eyes uncertain. You don't mean that. He looked at her for a long moment. No, but I wish I did. She smiled faintly, the saddest smile he'd ever seen. You always sound like a man halfway through a confession, he exhaled. That's because I am. Later that night, she found herself outside the hospital, standing in the rain. Her scrubs were soaked through. She didn't care. Every window of Saint Meridian glowed behind her, hundreds of tiny squares of white light, like eyes watching from the dark. She knew someone had seen them. Hospitals were built on observation. Nothing went unnoticed forever. But for now, she let herself feel the warmth of the memory, even as it stung like guilt. For the first time in years, she felt alive, and that terrified her. The next morning, rumors began. Riley cornered her at the locker room, a raised eyebrow and a tone far too casual. So, long night? Clara froze. What's that supposed to mean? Riley shrugged. Oh, nothing. Just heard the power went out in Neuro 3. People said you and Dr. Hale stayed behind longer than everyone else. Clara forced a laugh. We were cleaning up, right? And I'm sure that's all you were doing. Riley, her friend, raised both hands. Hey, relax. I don't care, but others might. Just be careful, okay? Clara nodded slowly. Yeah, okay. But her heart was already racing. That afternoon, Adrian found her by the vending machines. Someone knows, she said before he could speak. I heard. What do we do? Nothing, he said. We stay quiet, Adrian. Clara. His voice was sharp now, but not unkind. If we panic, we make it real. If we act normal, it's just gossip. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that silence could protect them. But deep down, she knew silence in hospitals doesn't last. That night, she couldn't sleep. The sound of the storm had stopped, but the echo remained thunder in her chest, lightning in her mind. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw his face under that single light, the moment before the kiss. She saw the way he looked at her, not like a colleague, not even like a lover, but like someone who'd finally found the thing he'd been running from. And for the first time, she wondered not what they had done but what it would cost. Because love wasn't the sin here, the lie was. The hospital was quieter now. Too quiet. After the storm and the blackout, the staff of Saint Meridian walked with new caution, not because of the weather, but because of what they'd seen in the dark. Rumors were the real infection here, spreading without cure. And this time, they had names. Clara Bennett had always believed hospitals were built on truth. Now, every hallway felt like a lie. She could feel it in the way people's eyes lingered too long when she passed. The way conversations stopped the moment she entered the room. The way even Riley, her closest friend, had begun to speak more carefully, weighing each word. It was subtle at first. A nurse who accidentally misplaced her paperwork. A resident who avoided sharing rounds. The head of HR suddenly reviewing overnight schedules. Saint Meridian had found its newest rumor, and it had her name on it. That morning, Clara stood at the nurse's station, filling out charts. The silence felt unnatural, the kind of quiet that hides something sharp. Riley approached, hesitant. You okay? Clara didn't look up. Define okay. You've got that look. What look? The one people get when the walls start closing in. Clara's pen froze mid-line. What have you heard? Riley sighed. Nothing official, but people are talking about you. And Hale. Clara's stomach dropped. Who? Does it matter? Riley's voice softened. Look, I don't care what you do, but HR will. And if Peterson finds out, he already suspects. Riley blinked. Then you need to fix it. Fast. How? Distance. Deny everything. Pretend it never happened. Clara stared at her reflection in the dark computer screen. It's too late for pretending. When she walked into Neuro that afternoon, Adrian was already waiting. He looked exhausted, dark circles beneath his eyes, scrubs still wrinkled from another sleepless night. Close the door, he said quietly. She did. They're asking questions, he continued. About the blackout. About why we stayed behind. Her pulse quickened. Who's asking? Peterson. Maybe both. Clara's throat tightened. What did you say? The truth. Which version? The one where nothing happened. She laughed bitterly. Do you really believe they'll buy that? They have to. She met his eyes. And if they don't, he hesitated just long enough for her to read the answer he didn't give. That evening, HR called her in. The office was bright and sterile, the walls lined with motivational posters that suddenly felt cruel. Across the table sat Linda Graves, head of human resources, a woman known for her calm smile and surgical precision. Clara, Linda began, voice gentle but rehearsed. This isn't a disciplinary meeting. We just want to clarify a few things. Clara nodded slowly. Of course, there were reports that during the power outage last week, you and Dr. Hale remained in the room after the backup team was dismissed. That's true, Clara said carefully. We stayed to clean up and monitor vitals. Understandable, Linda said, nodding. But That wasn't part of your assigned duty at the time, correct? No, but the patient's stability was uncertain. Linda folded her hands. You're a dedicated nurse, Clara. Everyone here respects that. We just have to ensure boundaries are being maintained. Clara felt her pulse in her throat. Boundaries, yes. The new fraternization policy, her voice almost broke. You think I'm having an affair with my attending surgeon? I didn't say that, but you're implying it. Linda smiled thinly. We simply need to confirm professionalism is being upheld. It was a question disguised as mercy, and Clara knew mercy here was never free. That night, she found Adrian in the on-call room, head in his hands. They questioned you too? She asked. He nodded. Same script, same tone. And I denied everything. Clara paced the room, running a hand through her hair. It won't be enough. They already decided we're guilty. He looked up, eyes weary but fierce. Then we fight it, with what? The truth. Yes, she let out a bitter laugh. The truth is what got us here. He stood. No, the lie did. She met his gaze. Which lie? The one we told them, or the one we keep telling ourselves? Days passed, each one tighter than the last. They tried to stay apart. No shared shifts, no hallway glances, no contact outside of emergencies. But distance was another kind of torture, and Saint Meridian didn't believe in mercy. One afternoon, while Clara was restocking the ICU supply cart, Dr. Peterson appeared in the doorway. Nurse Bennett, he said, his tone polite to polite. You've been with us 6 years, haven't you? Yes, sir. You've done excellent work. But I need to remind you that professionalism isn't optional here. I understand. He stepped closer. Good. Because HR isn't the only department watching. The board takes ethics seriously, especially after Torres. Clara held his gaze. With respect, sir, I've done nothing unethical. He smiled without warmth. Let's hope the cameras agree. Then he walked away. Cameras. Her blood ran cold. That night, she went to Adrian's office, her hands shaking. They have footage, she said. From the blackout. He froze. Impossible. The cameras went offline, not all of them. The hallway outside Neuro 3 still had emergency power. Peterson hinted at it. Adrian exhaled, the sound sharp. Then they know, maybe not everything. Clara, I don't regret it, she said suddenly. Not 1 second. But I can't lose this job. It's all I have. He looked at her, really looked, and for once, he had no answers. I'll take the blame, he said finally. No, they'll fire you first and ruin your career next. You think they'll stop with me? You're the name they want, Adrian. The headline. He stepped forward, his voice low and rough. Then let them have me. She shook her head. I won't let you do that. Then what? I don't know. They stood there, 2 people already condemned by what they couldn't undo. The following morning, Saint Meridian buzzed with whispers. Someone had leaked the footage. It wasn't explicit, not really. Just a few seconds of grainy hallway video. Clara and Adrian, alone after the blackout. Her hand brushing his arm, his face too close. It was enough. By noon, everyone had seen it. By evening, it had reached the administration board. When she entered the staff lounge that night, the room fell silent. Nurses looked away. Residents pretended to be busy. Riley stood in the corner, eyes full of worry. Clara, she whispered. I tried to warn you. Clara's throat burned. I know. Riley hesitated. They're calling it unprofessional conduct. They're meeting tomorrow to decide what to do. Clara forced a nod. Thanks. Then she turned and walked out, not crying, not breaking, just empty. Adrian was waiting outside near the ambulance bay, the rain coming down hard again. They called me in tomorrow, he said quietly. Me too. He stared out into the rain. We can still fix this. How? Tell them it was a misunderstanding, misinterpreted footage, and the kiss? He flinched. They didn't see that yet. She stepped closer. We can't build a lie on top of another one, Adrian. He met her gaze, rain running down his face like tears. Then tell me what to do. Tell them the truth. He shook his head slowly. The truth ruins us both, she nodded. Maybe it already has. That night, she couldn't sleep. The hospital outside her window pulsed with light, constant and unforgiving. In her dreams, she was back in the blackout standing under the single beam of emergency light, the sound of her own heart louder than the storm. Only this time, when she looked up, he wasn't there. The next morning, the hearing was held in Conference Room B, the same room where new staff orientation used to take place. Funny, she thought, how beginnings and endings always looked the same. She sat across from the board 3 administrators, HR, and Peterson. Adrian sat to her left, silent, his hands folded tightly in his lap. Dr. Hale, Peterson began, you understand the seriousness of these allegations? Yes, and you deny them? Adrian hesitated. I do. Peterson turned to Clara. Nurse Bennett? She looked at the faces before her, all polished professionalism and cold curiosity. Then she looked at Adrian, his eyes pleading, tired, afraid. And she lied. Yes, she said softly. I deny them. The words tasted like betrayal and salt. The meeting ended with promises of further review, but Clara knew what that meant. Suspension, then dismissal. Not immediately, they'd make it look procedural, but soon enough. When they stepped out into the hallway, Adrian grabbed her arm. You didn't have to do that. She looked at him, tears finally breaking free. I couldn't let them take you down too. He shook his head. You just made it worse. Maybe, she said, her voice trembling. But at least I did something right for once. He wanted to argue, to pull her close, to undo everything. Instead, he let go. Whatever happens next, he said, his voice breaking for the first time, you were worth it. She turned away before the tears took over. That night, she sat alone in the dark, staring at the hospital across the street. The same white lights that had once meant safety now felt like judgment. Somewhere inside those walls, someone was watching, waiting for the final decision. And she knew tomorrow, nothing would be the same. Because love in a hospital isn't a fairy tale, it's a diagnosis. And theirs was terminal. The rain hadn't stopped for 3 days. It fell over Saint Meridian like penance, washing the glass, the concrete, the lies. Inside, the hospital carried on, pretending nothing had changed. But everything had. Nurse Clara Bennett was under suspension. Dr. Adrian Hale was under review. And yet both of them still showed up, in their own ways, ghosts in the hallways they once ruled. Clara spent her suspension in silence. No scrubs, no monitors, no adrenaline, just the ticking of her apartment clock and the echo of words she wished she hadn't said. The hospital had told her it was temporary administrative leave pending outcome. She knew better. Suspension was a slow execution. Every hour away from Saint Meridian felt like suffocation. She'd built her life around saving people. Now, she couldn't even save herself. Her phone buzzed twice that week. Both times, it was Adrian. She didn't answer. On the 5th night, she finally broke. The city outside was a blur of wet streets and ambulance sirens, the sounds of a life she wasn't allowed to live anymore. She called him. He answered on the first ring. Clara, for a second, neither spoke. Just the sound of rain on the line. I shouldn't have lied, she said. You saved us both. No, she whispered. I killed what was left, he exhaled. They're still deciding what? Whether to destroy one life or two. He didn't respond. Finally, she said, can we meet? He hesitated. It's not safe, I don't care. They met that night in the hospital parking lot after midnight. The rain came down in sheets, pulling around their feet, thunder rumbling over the city. Adrian stood there in his coat, collar turned up, eyes shadowed and tired. You shouldn't be here, he said quietly. She stepped closer. Neither should you, he almost smiled. We keep saying that, and we keep doing it anyway. They stood under the awning, faces half lit by the glow of an emergency exit light. How bad is it? She asked. Bad, termination, likely, for both of us? He hesitated. They'll spare you. They need nurses. Surgeons are easier to replace. That's not true. It is, he said softly. And you know it. Lightning flashed across the parking lot, lighting up the rain between them. She stepped forward, close enough for her voice to drop. Do you regret it? He met her eyes. Do you want the truth? Yes, no, he said. Not even for a second. Her breath caught. Then why does it feel like punishment? Because it is. They stood there, the sound of the storm swallowing everything else. Then she said what neither of them wanted to admit. We can't survive this. He nodded slowly. Maybe we're not meant to. She looked away, blinking back tears. Then why does it still hurt like hell? Because love doesn't die with consequence, he said. It just hides under it. A car passed nearby, its headlights cutting through the rain. They stepped apart instinctively, old habits hiding what shouldn't have existed. When the lights faded, he said quietly, I should go. Early rounds tomorrow, even now. Especially now, she tried to smile. You'll save lives while they decide whether to end yours. He gave a small, tired laugh. That's medicine. She wanted to say more, to tell him that she'd stand by him, that she'd fight, but the words died in her throat. Instead, she said, good night, and when he turned to leave, she whispered, I miss you. He didn't turn around, but his voice carried back through the rain. I know. 2 days later, the hospital called her back. HR wanted a final statement. The meeting was shorter this time. No smiles, no pleasantries, just signatures and silence. You're free to reapply in 6 months, Linda said, her tone carefully neutral. Pending clearance from the board, Clara wanted to laugh. Free? There was nothing freeing about it. When she walked out, she saw Adrian through the glass wall of the conference room next door, surrounded by administrators, faces grim, his own expression unreadable. Their eyes met for half a second before a man closed the blinds. She waited outside for him for hours. When he finally emerged, it was dark again. His steps were slow, heavy, like someone carrying something invisible but unbearable. What happened? She asked. He didn't answer. Adrian, they suspended my license, he said flatly. What? Pending investigation. Her heart sank. For how long? 6 months. Maybe more. She took a step closer. That's insane. You didn't hurt anyone. He laughed once dry, hollow. You don't have to hurt anyone to ruin yourself. Adrian, they needed an example, he said quietly. A warning. I fit the part. She reached for his hand. He let her. For a long moment, they just stood there, two people stripped of everything that had once defined them. Weeks passed. Clara tried to move on temp jobs, night shifts in smaller clinics, but Saint Meridian haunted her. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw its hallways, its lights, its ghosts. She thought of Adrian constantly, but she didn't reach out. What could she say? I miss you. I'm sorry. I wish we'd never met. All of it was true. None of it would change anything. Then one night, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. One sentence. They need me back for an emergency. She didn't hesitate. By the time she reached Saint Meridian, the sky was black again. The hospital was chaos, ambulances lined up outside, nurses running, doctors shouting orders. What happened? She asked a paramedic rushing past. Pile up on the freeway. 7 critical. Inside, the air was alive again, not with gossip this time, but with desperation. And at the center of it all was Adrian. He wasn't supposed to be there. His suspension hadn't been lifted, but he was in scrubs, hands already bloody, voice cutting through the noise. Clamp! I need suction here. Someone shouted. He's not cleared to operate. Adrian ignored them. Then find someone who is and watch them do nothing. Clara moved before she could think. She grabbed gloves, tied her hair back, and stepped into the light beside him. The room fell into rhythm. Patient on the table, pressure dropping, life fading. Clara's voice was steady again, old muscle memory returning. BP 60/40, hold the line, Adrian said, his hands moving with surgical grace. He's coding, someone yelled. Not yet. For a moment, it felt like the blackout all over again, the chaos, the fear, the two of them fighting the universe to save one heartbeat. Then the monitor beeped. A pulse. The room exhaled. When the patient stabilized, Peterson stormed in. What the hell is going on here? Adrian didn't even look up. Saving lives, sir. You're suspended. Would you rather I let him die? Peterson's face flushed with rage. Get out, now. Clara stepped forward. He just saved a man's life. Both of you out. Security arrived. The kind that never ran during a code but always ran for control. Adrian turned to her, eyes steady. Go. No, Clara. She shook her head. Not this time, Peterson barked. Now, and for the first time, Adrian raised his voice not at the patient, not at fate, but at her. Please, it wasn't a command. It was a plea. She stepped back, slowly, reluctantly. As they let him out, he glanced at her once. Just once. It said everything. Don't come after me. She didn't sleep that night. The city outside was silent again, but her mind wasn't. She thought of the man they'd saved alive because Adrian refused to follow orders, and she thought of the price he'd pay for it. The next morning, the news broke internally. Unauthorized procedure, doctor removed from staff pending full termination. That was how it ended, not with scandal, not with romance, but with a single sentence. A week later, Clara received an envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside a letter. Clara, you were right. We couldn't survive it, but I don't regret a single second. The truth is, I don't know how to exist without this place, without you. Maybe one day, when the world forgets our names, we can start again somewhere without rules. Until then, keep breathing for both of us. AAHE, the paper was damp from rain, or tears. She couldn't tell. Months passed. Saint Meridian carried on. New nurses, new surgeons, new rumors. But sometimes at night, when the hallways were empty and the machines hummed softly, Clara swore she could still hear his voice. Scalpel, hold the line, you were worth it. Maybe she imagined it. Maybe not. Either way, she kept showing up. Because that's what you did in medicine. You kept showing up, even when everything hurt. And somewhere between heartbeats, she began to understand. Silence wasn't her punishment. It was her penance. 6 months later, winter arrived. The first snow fell over the city like a sigh, soft and relentless, muting the noise that had once kept her awake at night. From her apartment window, Clara Bennett watched the world turn white, clean, distant, almost forgiving. She hadn't been back to Saint Meridian Medical Center since the night they took Dr. Adrian Hale away. At least, not until the letter came. A single envelope, no name on the front. Inside, we need extra staff for the winter rotation. You've been cleared for rehire. No mention of the past. No apology. Hospitals didn't apologize. They recycled. She stared at the letter for hours, wondering if she had the strength to go back to the place that had built her and broken her in the same breath. Then she folded the paper neatly, set her alarm for 5 o'clock a.m., and said out loud just once, "All right, let's go home." Saint Meridian hadn't changed. Same sterile lights, same smell of disinfectant, same echoing hallways where secrets lived in the shadows between footsteps. But it felt different now, like she was walking through the memory of something that once mattered. The nurses' station was new. The staff wasn't. Some smiled when they saw her. Some didn't. Clara Bennett, someone said from behind her. She turned. It was Dr. Peterson. "Welcome back," he said, in that same polished tone that could mean anything. "Thank you, sir. You'll be on rotation in the trauma unit." "It's short-staffed, understood." He paused, eyes narrowing. "Try to keep your head down this time." She smiled faintly. "I've learned." He nodded once and walked away, leaving behind a silence that said more than words ever could. That night, she worked her first shift back. 12 hours, 6 patients, 3 emergencies. It was chaos, beautiful, familiar chaos. And for a while, she forgot, until the smell of rain hit the air conditioning. Until a thunderstorm rolled in over the city, heavy, slow, deliberate. The lights flickered once, twice. For a heartbeat, she was back there again. The blackout, the silence, the single light above the table. His voice, his hands. The moment everything changed, her chest tightened. Then a nurse called her name, snapping her out of it. "Bennett, trauma incoming." She ran, because that's what she did best. The patient was a man in his 40s, head trauma, broken ribs, severe concussion. As the paramedics transferred him onto the bed, Clara's eyes caught something, the name tag clipped to his torn jacket. Hale. Her pulse stopped. For a second, she thought her mind was playing tricks. The name was common enough, the city big enough, the odds impossible. But when the blood cleared and the light hit his face, her world shattered again. Adrian. She froze. The sounds around her blurred, monitors, footsteps, voices all dissolving into a static hum. Someone shouted, "We need page neurology now." But she was already moving, autopilot overriding fear. BP dropping. A resident yelled. "Celine," she said, voice trembling. "Pupils unequal. Possible intracranial bleed." She pressed gauze to his head, her fingers shaking. "Adrian, stay with me." A younger nurse glanced at her. "You know him." Clara didn't answer. "Page or two," the attending barked. "We're opening his skull if we have to." The words cut through her like a blade. Opening his skull, that was his line, his specialty. And now it was being said about him. They wheeled him down the hall past the same white walls, the same flickering lights, the same ghosts. Clara walked beside the gurney, her hand never leaving his arm. He was unconscious, pale, a faint smear of dried blood running through his hair. She whispered, "Don't you dare leave me again." The door slammed open to the OR. She wasn't supposed to go in. Suspended staff couldn't assist surgeries. But when she tried to step back, someone grabbed her arm. It was Dr. Riley Torres. "Come on," she said. "We're short on hands." Clara blinked. "Riley, you're back. Long story. Move." And just like that, the past collided with the present. The surgery was chaos, familiar and cruel. The attending surgeon called for suction, clamps, retractors. Riley worked opposite him, calm but fierce. Clara stood by the monitor, watching every dip in pressure, every flicker of the heart rate. Her voice was steady, her heart wasn't. For 2 hours, she lived in that room, and every second was a battle between medicine and memory. Then the attending said quietly, "Pressure stabilizing." She looked up at the monitor, the numbers steady now, the rhythm strong. Adrian was alive. When it was over, she waited outside the ICU. The hallway lights hummed. The air smelled like rain. Riley came out, removing her mask. "He's stable. We stopped the bleed. He'll need time, but he's lucky." Clara's voice cracked. "He's always been lucky." Riley looked at her for a long moment. "You too." Clara didn't answer. Riley nodded anyway. "Thought so. How did he end up here?" "Car accident. Skid on the highway. He wasn't supposed to be in the city." Clara swallowed hard. "Guess we're all where we shouldn't be." Hours passed. The rain stopped. The world exhaled. She sat beside his bed, the monitors glowing softly in the dark. He looked smaller, somehow vulnerable, human, stripped of all the power that had once made him untouchable. She reached for his hand. It was warm. "You idiot," she whispered. "You couldn't stay away, could you?" His fingers twitched. "Adrian," his eyes opened, slow, disoriented. "Then they found her." For a moment, he just stared. "Then, you came back." She smiled through tears. "You first." He tried to laugh, but it came out as a wince. "Guess I'm consistent." She brushed the hair from his forehead. "You shouldn't talk. You never listened when I said that. Still don't." He smiled faintly, then closed his eyes again. "I missed you," she whispered. "I know." Days turned into weeks. He recovered slowly. Every day, she came by his room, sometimes to talk, sometimes just to sit in silence. The hospital didn't ask questions. Maybe they'd learned something too. One afternoon, as she changed his for line, he said, "I've been offered a position." She froze. "Here," he shook his head. "Boston. Research fellowship. Private sector." Her throat tightened. "When?" "Next month." She nodded, trying to sound casual. "That's great. You'll love it." He watched her carefully. "Come with me." She looked at him, startled. "What? I can get you in. They always need good nurses." She laughed softly. "You don't even have clearance yet." "I will, Adrian, I mean it." His voice was quiet but certain. We spent so long trying to hide from something that was never wrong to begin with. Her eyes glistened. It was wrong, not to love the world around it. Then let's find a new one. She wanted to say yes. She wanted to imagine a future where they weren't shadows sneaking through corridors, where their love wasn't a secret or a sin. But Saint Meridian wasn't done with her. That evening, Peterson called her into his office. "You've been rehired provisionally," he said, "but if you leave before your term ends, your reinstatement will be void. So you're saying I can't leave?" "I'm saying you shouldn't," she frowned. "Because of ethics?" He smiled thinly. "Because you belong here." The words felt like a cage. That night, she stood outside the hospital, the city lights reflecting in puddles of melting snow. Adrian's window glowed above, the faint outline of his figure visible through the curtain. She whispered, "Go," and she meant it. On his last day, she walked him to the doors. He was still pale but steady, his coat buttoned, his bag slung over his shoulder. They didn't speak for a while. Then he said softly, "If I stay, I'll drown, I know. And if you come with me?" She smiled faintly. "I'll still drown, just somewhere else." He laughed once, the sound like relief and heartbreak all at once. He reached for her hand, squeezed it gently. "You were the best thing that ever happened to me." She looked at him through tears. "Then why does it feel like goodbye?" "Because it is." He left, and the world didn't stop. Ambulances still arrived, patients still coded, life went on. But the space he left behind never filled. Days turned to weeks, weeks to months. Sometimes when the night shift was quiet and the snow fell outside the window, Clara would pause by the neuro wing. She'd hear Echo's voices from another lifetime. "Scalpel. Hold the line. You were worth it." And she'd smile, not with pain, but with something gentler. Because love, she realized, doesn't always survive, but it leaves residue, in memories, in people, in places that once held it. One night, she walked out to the hospital roof. The city stretched beneath her, cold, endless, beautiful. She whispered into the wind, "You were right, Adrian. Home is a myth." Then she smiled faintly. "But maybe I've finally stopped running." And for the first time in years, she breathed without breaking.